ABC 15, breaking news.
And that breaking news, just horrible. A massive lithium battery fire and at least 8 firefighters hurt in an explosion.
We are told there was some sort of an explosion.
The force of the blast knocked the helmets and face masks
there are serious
off the
concerns
firefighters.
being expressed tonight about lithium-ion batteries, the same batteries in practically every cell phone, laptop, and tablet on the market.
We see them all over the road right now.
Fires like this can happen in an accident.
There's an instance of a car crashed in California in a garage. The fire brigade put the fire out after a great deal of water. It sits quiescent apparently, and then starts belching white smoke, toxic smoke. So they put lots more water on. It's apparently quiescent again for 90 minutes, and then we get these rocket flames coming out from underneath. So they put it out again. They then lift it onto the back of the recovery truck, and that movement reignites it again. So a key question, is the vehicle out? Is it safe to move?
I started hearing about these electric vehicles burning and exploding. Essentially, large batteries, really, electric vehicles, grid-scale systems, didn't appear until 2008. Okay, now we'd had problems with small batteries in computers and things like that beforehand. But remember, lithium batteries were discovered around the mid-80s. Okay. Now we've had 120 years, 30, 40 years to learn about internal combustion engines. We've only had since 2008 to really start understanding the big batteries and the implications they have. And don't forget, the lead-acid battery was discovered in 1859 in France and immediately commercialized. And it's been around ever since. And people are used to it. And the problem is that most people assume that a lithium-ion battery is just the same as a lead-acid battery, and it's not. The rate at which they've penetrated all levels of our society, in my view, has far outstripped our understanding of the risks and hazards.
I don't know if there's a comparison. I might be stretching for an analogy here, but when I remember all the work that was done with asbestos and how that was used, so it was like the miracle mineral, wasn't it? It was used in all sorts of construction and materials and clothing and everything like that. And then we realized it was all around us and we went, oh God, it's really dangerous.
I think a lot of the problem with lithium batteries is regulation. In many ways, it's the Wild West out there, and the public with essentially no knowledge of it. And secondhand, they can buy an electric vehicle battery that might have been abused to the point of being unstable. They won't know. They can buy it, throw it in the back of their van or truck, drive home, disassemble it, and make a battery energy storage system for the solar array. And this unregulated trade is putting the public very much at risk, in my view. There's a huge amount of energy in a very small space. Now, that's great, but it comes at a price. If that energy gets out in an uncontrolled fashion, then you're in trouble. Then we are talking thermal runaway. And that's the bad boy in the story. So if you heat it, if you penetrate it, if you crush, basically abuse starts those chemical processes again. They generate heat and gases like hydrogen, methane, hydrofluoric acid gas, hydrochloric acid gas, hydrogen cyanide. That heat speeds up the processes to generate even more heat and gas. And once the heat is produced faster than it can be dissipated, then basically the cells pop and release the gases along with small droplets of the organic solvent. And that gives the vapor cloud, and it is a vapor cloud, the appearance of steam or smoke. And that's bad news if you mistake it for steam or smoke, because steam or smoke are not explosive. And you're talking very large volumes of gas. A typical electric vehicle might be 100 kilowatt hours. So you're looking at 50,000 to 600,000 litres of this explosive gas. But if we wind down a bit, an e-scooter or an e-bike is around 0.25 to half a kilowatt hour. Half a kilowatt hour, you're still looking at 250 to 3,000 litres of this explosive gas. And that is why we are having explosions as well as fires in people's homes due to these light electric vehicles, as they're called. So yes, I think there's a whole bundle of interesting situations just waiting to happen.
The incident Parson Green Tube Station, November 21.
That was an e-scooter that spontaneously combusted on the tube. They threw it off the tube where it burned on the platform. But the poor owner can be heard on the video you've seen coughing his guts up. And we don't know what the long-term exposure to these fumes, either the vapor cloud or the fumes, is. The vapor cloud, 500 to 6,000 litres, if that burns, then the fumes are about half that, but that's still an enormous amount of smoke. In the last month, we've had 2 or 3 incidents on board aircraft of either laptops going up or a couple involving power banks. When I was flying from Canberra to Sydney, I think it was, I was getting on the plane and I noticed that the senior steward was very upset and was talking to a disabled passenger who I'd seen on one of these really up-to-date disabled scooters.
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, the battery on that was exactly the same as an e-scooter battery. And I don't know if you've seen the video of the e-scooter vapor clouds deflagrating, but if that had gone up and vented the vapor cloud, it would have taken out the aircraft. But there's not much you can do, because at the cruising altitude, you can't vent to the outside, apparently.
Can't vent, you can't depressurize the cabin.
You're looking at 125 to 1,500 litres of gas in a relatively small volume. So
even if it didn't catch fire,
exactly.
You're looking at an irrespirable atmosphere for everyone, probably up until including the pilots. I wouldn't know, but yeah, it's a scary thought.
Yeah, and an explosive atmosphere as well.
Was I right in reading that Germany has banned electric vehicles parking in certain parking lots?
2 cities have banned electric vehicles. The problem is getting the water to where it's needed. In an electric vehicle, the cells are inside a metal case. That metal case generally has a metal plate underneath protecting it. Above it, there is the floor, the carpets, the seats, the windows, and the chassis. Now, because the gas is produced at very high pressure, when it finally vents from that battery pack, it will do so through a weak point, but it's coming out at high pressure, which means that even if you could point your hose at that hole, the water wouldn't go in because there's such a huge pressure of gas coming out.
Yeah.
And putting water onto an electric vehicle is rather like when your kitchen's on fire, pouring water onto the roof of the house. So in general, the German cities said, look, we know you can't put electric vehicle fires out. It's too much of a risk. So they banned electric vehicles from their what's called parking houses. But you can't do that. If we are going to have a truly electric mobility society, you can't ban them from parking houses. And indeed, what's just happened is a Scandinavian ferry company's banned them from their ferries. You can't do that. We've seen of the 354 incidents to date, about 5% of them were vapor cloud explosions, where the vapor cloud exited from the battery pack, saturated the surrounding area, then deflagrated. There's a car in Shanghai. The driver had driven over some debris which punctured the battery case. He then parked up, and the kind of CCTV camera caught the emission of the vapor cloud, and then the subsequent explosion which took out the cars either side. And the time from the first appearance of the vapor cloud to the actual explosion is only 6 seconds. The fact is that because there's such a high amount of gas comes off, even small lithium-ion batteries can actually cause vapor cloud explosions.
I remember seeing a video, I think it's on one of your presentations as well, the Tesla crash in Moscow, where it almost, back in 2019, it was a matter of seconds later when the entire thing appeared to just catch fire.
Well, yes, I mean, that was where the battery itself exploded twice.
From my very limited knowledge, and you're far better than me, so please correct me, we don't seem to have an agreed solution as to the best way to deal with these.
The kind of perceived wisdom is, wherever possible, leave them to burn. Because that then means that what's left is scrap rather than a piece of dangerous goods. And also it means that when the recovery firm come to take it away and you sign it off as a fire service, you can be sure that it's not going to reignite hours, days or weeks later in the recovery yard and cause damage, or worse still, death or injury.
But what if somebody's trapped in it?
Well, that's the nightmare scenario. I mean, as I understand it, typically you would use a ram to push the dashboard back, and you don't get that on the floor of the vehicle. Well, if you do that in an electric vehicle, you risk cracking the battery case.
That's what I'm saying. We put it down into the B post, and we would effectively just start to manipulate the metal. And
I do know that the likes of the UK Rescue Organisation are, really pondering this and looking at this in detail. We will deal with it. We will. But at the moment, it's a new challenge.
Around these second-hand batteries, so that you can buy damaged or crashed second-hand electric vehicles. Yes,
you can. You can buy the battery packs. I've seen them. A battery pack partly covered in a tarpaulin, damaged. It says damaged. £6,000, I think it was. But very cleverly, they say buyer picks it up, because that circumvents what little rules, regulations, the Carriage of Dangerous Goods Act. If you buy one of these battery packs, 400 to 800 volts, and the courier has to be ADR trained, you have to buy a metal box, which I believe is around £50,000 to put it in, and you have to inform the Department for Transport that you're about to transport it, if you pay for a courier to pick it up. If, however, you pick it up yourself, you can throw it in the back of your truck and drive off without any of that.
Talk to me about those grid size complexes, because one 2 firefighters died in Beijing with one of them.
Because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, you need to store the electricity they generate. You can then collect it together and deliver it to the grid in a meaningful way. And lithium-ion batteries are brilliant for that, absolutely brilliant. And so what's happening across this country and a lot of countries is that these lithium-ion battery energy storage systems are springing up. Now, these are very large. Now, in Beijing, this was on top of a shopping mall, but that required 235 firefighters, 45 fire tenders to contain. And as is the usual case, you can't actually put them out. And indeed, as they're going to more and more high energy density enclosures, the recommendations of some manufacturers, which are quite sensible, is that don't try and put these things out, just let them burn, just protect the surrounding containers. I'm talking about the big ones, the ones that support the national grid. The domestic systems are my nightmare. 54% were in the loft. And that's often in new homes where the air circulation system is. And you know, as a firefighter, you don't want fires in the loft.
No.
And 5% were under the main staircase. That is a nightmare. You can't let them burn. But the trouble is, because lithium-ion battery fires develop so quickly, by the time the fire service turns up, 5 minutes, it's no longer a lithium-ion battery fire. It's a house fire.
So we've got a fire that won't go out with an electric source we can't turn off on the top of the house where we can't access.
Yeah. Apart from that, you've got no problems, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, there's no way of you knowing. And the advice I give to firefighters when I do the presentations is, if you see a solar array on somebody's home or on a business or a wind turbine, assume until you're told otherwise that there's a lithium battery system in there somewhere. But there are absolutely no regulations governing where these systems can be installed in the home. In Australia and New Zealand, you're not allowed to put the battery inside the domestic environment. And it's the same in the United States, actually. Essentially, if one of these e-scooters, e-bikes, hoverboards, if they go into thermal runaway in your home, from the EV FireSafe website, you have a 14% chance of dying and a 64% chance of ending up in hospital.
Fire blankets, I've seen some videos of those. To what extent are they effective, and are they just a temporary solution for certain instances?
I truly and honestly believe that fire blankets have a role to play, but it very much depends upon the situation, and it critically depends upon the understanding and the training of the operators.
Now, I know you guys can put out a fire and open a road again in an hour if it's a conventional internal combustion vehicle. You've got no chance with an electric vehicle. You're looking at much, much longer because of the danger of reignition, because of problems of gas, etc. And also, of course, recovery services are becoming a bit leery about dealing with RTCs involving electric vehicles because of the danger of reignition. And a couple of tips that come from my contacts in Australia who've got quite a lot of experience of this. Beware of remote operation keys. You don't need to be near the car to start it up. Avoid towing, because of course that will activate the motor, which will generate electricity. And be wary of contact with battery fluids. In fact, seek first aid instantly.
The firefighters were deployed a fire blanket, but didn't understand the risks and hazards. Didn't realise whilst they'd cut off the oxygen, they basically set an electric vehicle on fire, then put a fire blanket on it. They didn't realise that the stuff that was coming through the fire blanket was actually vapour cloud, because the fire was out underneath it. And because they weren't cooling the cells, they were still in thermal runaway and boiling off the vapour cloud. And then they removed the fire blanket, and there's a small vapour cloud explosion. If there hadn't been a howling wind, he could have been killed or injured. Fire blankets, so long as you understand what you're doing, you understand the risks, they can buy time. And so I do believe they have a role. But you really do have to understand what you're doing. You have to be fully aware of the risks. And you have to understand that putting people next to a big lithium battery in thermal runaway has a very high associated risk.